Welcome to the Life with Grief podcast. I'm your host, grief and transformational life coach and fellow griever, Tara Accardo. Hello and welcome back to the Life with Grief podcast, and welcome to day 3 of the 5 days of holiday grief. Today we are digging into how to handle grief triggers and anxiety around the holidays. And I just want to preface this by saying I feel like this is actually a bigger conversation than I can sort of even fit in this mini-sode here. So a couple things. Number one, I actually have an entire episode around grief triggers by itself, holiday grief or not. So go check that out. That's episode 15 if you feel like you need more help sort of coping with and navigating grief triggers overall. So this is just very high level. I'm just going to kind of acknowledge it and give you some tips here today just to be able to cope with this a little better. But more on this podcast to come on that. There's even some guests that I spoke with recently that are going to be on the podcast that have a lot of vulnerability around their anxiety and things like that. So stay tuned. I just want to acknowledge that, give some context there, put that out there before we sort of dig in. But today we are diving into a topic that hits close to home for a lot of us, I think, and that's not only holiday grief overall, right? That's what these 5 days are about, but triggers around this holiday season specifically. And for those of us who have lost someone, a loved one, as I've mentioned the last couple of days, the holiday season can feel like you are just walking through a minefield of memories and traditions and ultimately triggers. So if you find yourself just dreading this upcoming season, or you're in the season now, depending when you're listening to this, or are struggling with the unexpected waves of sadness, know that you are not alone. It is completely valid to feel this way. It makes sense that you're feeling this way because, like we talked about yesterday, there is such a pressure to feel happy and grateful and joyful and merry and bright and, all of these things from friends and family around us and society, and we have advertisements and messaging and everything. So by the way, if you want to hear more on that conversation, tune into yesterday's day 2 on that and how to navigate that. But I really want to focus today on just navigating those grief holiday triggers a little bit and finding ways to handle them with compassion and compassion for yourself. So again, shorty episode today, but let's start with just talking about what these holiday triggers even are. And really, essentially, I mean, like any trigger, holiday or not, it's just anything that reminds you of your loved one and the fact that they are no longer here. And I keep saying grief triggers, by the way. I wish I had a better word for trigger. I don't have one in the moment, so I apologize. So bear with me. I wish I had a slightly more PC word for that right now. But basically, these things that can upset us, they can be big or small. Maybe it is a holiday song. Maybe it's seeing the decorations your loved one used to put up. Like for me, my parents' Christmas tree, they had a fake one that we just still use because we have a condo and we're kind of in a small space and we still use it. And every year that gets me a little bit. I wince. I remember us putting the ornaments on and just there's so many little nuances that come with these things. But it could also be something as simple as like a scent. Maybe it's like gingerbread cookies or, again, like a certain candle or it's a certain food or drink or something. I mean, there's so many aspects of the holiday season that can bring these things up. And actually, perfect example, even just a day or two ago, I was walking with my daughter. I had her in the stroller. And it was like it was like after work hours and sort of a cool evening, and someone had a fire going and I could smell like the embers and like I could smell the fire, which I love. I love that smell. But for me, whenever I like smell fire, that evokes my childhood for me. It takes me back to growing up on the East Coast and experiencing winter there. And it is so cozy and it's so homey to me. But now I'm trying to reassociate new memories with that. And like I said, I have my daughter now. I mean, there's still a comfort and happiness there, But there is absolutely a void, I feel, experiencing a scent like that and not having my parents around too. So it's just incredible where these things can come up, and it can come up in the grocery store when we're shopping for holiday foods. I mean, really, it's limitless, unfortunately. And so I just want to call that out. Like, that's hard enough. But especially during the holiday season, everything seems to be amplified. It is a time that is associated with family gatherings, like I said earlier, joy, togetherness. And when you're grieving, it can just feel like a glaring reminder of what or who is missing from your holiday season. And this pressure to be cheerful can feel so suffocating. We talked about that in the last couple of days, so I won't harp on that. But it's especially suffocating feeling if you are just doing your best to just get through the day. If getting up is a chore for you, if going to work is all you can muster, and it's like the last thing we need are these triggers on top of it, right? And the especially unfortunate thing about loss is that, as you probably know if you're listening to this podcast, it does not care about your calendar. It does not care what you have on the books. It doesn't care what day, time it is, nothing. It will put itself on your calendar and it will just simply not go away. And just because it's been months, maybe years, maybe decades since your loss occurred, it doesn't mean that you can't be hit with waves of sadness. And again, I mean, that my East Coast childhood I was talking about, I haven't lived there since I was 10. I'm 33 now. So there's no time limit on how these triggers and things can evoke memories and emotions for us. The holidays bring back those memories and emotions that you had thought you had already worked through too. So let's say you feel like you're doing really well, but that's why this holiday grief season, I feel like, is such an important thing to call out, because let's say we were having like a really good year and we were doing pretty well and you felt maybe good going into this season, and now all of a sudden you're here and things are hitting you left and right, and it can make us kind of panicky because we're like, I thought I was good. I thought I had coped with this. I thought maybe you hadn't like moved on, but like you were doing a little bit better than you are now. That's okay. It's I'm going to say this a million times. You've probably heard this. I hope you've heard this. Grief is not a linear process. It is a winding road. It's got bumps, it's got curves, it's got all the things. So we have to make space for that. So that being said, what can we do to prepare ourselves for these inevitable triggers? For this shorty episode, here are just some very, very high level things to keep in mind and just maybe put into practice this season. Number one, I've said this in the last couple episodes, but it's worth saying here because I really feel like this is like coping tool number one. Acknowledge your feelings. It is okay if you are not feeling in the holiday spirit. You cannot, and I encourage you not to, force yourself to be cheerful just because everyone seems to be or is like forcing that on you. That can, in a lot of instances, actually make us feel worse and sort of make the coping process a little more difficult. So allow yourself to feel whatever comes up. Sometimes just acknowledging this is a difficult moment. I am here. This is not a good moment I'm having right now. I'm really struggling. Okay, let me take a deep breath. Let me work through this. Let me acknowledge it. That is a beautiful step to just witness our grief, give ourselves a moment, gain our composure, and work through that moment. And pretty soon you might have a moment of joy that comes in. You might have a moment of gratitude that comes in. It's like anything else in life. We might have a moment of frustration over, I don't know, something a friend did or said, right? Like that could come up at any moment. And then 20 minutes later, you could be laughing about something else. Grief is very much that. It's kind of on steroids, right? It's just, it's intensified in a lot of ways. So another thing I want you to keep in mind, and I've talked about this a little before in the other episodes too, is setting those boundaries. It is perfectly okay to say no to certain gatherings or traditions, even if you are not up for them. let's say there is a tradition or something that you do, or a drink that you have, or a dish that you make, or something that maybe just feels too triggering, but maybe there's something about it that like reminds you of your loved one. So you're kind of having this push pull of like, do I make this? Do I have this? Do I honor them in this way? Or is this just simply too painful for me right now? God willing, we have another holiday season the next year. You could always do it later. It doesn't have to be the holiday season to make that special dish or whatever. I mean, there's sort of no rules to grief and to grieving, right? So give yourself that permission to opt out. You do not owe anyone an explanation for prioritizing your mental health. And hopefully those around you want you taking care of your mental health too. So last thing here, I always try and encourage is just like having a plan B. So these triggers, obviously they can pop up unexpectedly. So it's really helpful to have sort of an escape route in mind. If you're at a gathering, or if you're just in a space where you feel yourself feeling a bit overwhelmed, consider taking a walk, excusing yourself to the bathroom for just a few minutes, a couple minutes, take some deep breaths, heading home early from something if that's what you need, or just simply not agreeing to the plans. It's okay. Hopefully people around you understand. But what I like about this boundary setting, if you will, that I didn't really touch on yesterday and the day before too, is it can give you a little more sense of control in a time that feels very out of control, and our emotions are just a little wonkier than usual. So it just gives you a little bit of your power back, so to speak. So let's talk a little bit about just anxiety while we're grieving during the holidays. I know I mentioned this. I wanted to touch on this. The combination of grief and the pressures of the holiday season can 1000% lead to heightened anxiety. So just a quick couple of ways to cope with this that I would recommend as a grief coach. With these expectations that we feel often from family or friends or even yourself, a really good way to kind of just, again, give yourself a moment of peace and clarity throughout all of this is a couple things. Number one, take a moment to ask yourself, what is really causing my anxiety? Take a moment, check in with yourself and ask that question, and like really kind of take a moment to get to the root of it, because in understanding the root of it, it can help you better address it, which of course you probably want to do, right? You want to make sure that you're coping with things in the right way. And if you're asking yourself that question almost as an outsider, you never know what might come up for you. Your answer might surprise yourself. And I invite you to dig deep here. Go a little bit deeper than I'm missing my mom. That's it. I'm just missing my mom. Okay, what are you missing about her? What is it that's coming up for you that is really, really triggering you here? Really, really kind of getting you, is making your heart wince a little, and getting curious and digging deep in that way. That's a really beautiful practice. If you feel you're needing some relief from grief, ways to manage stress and anxiety, and a tool that gives you a dose of hope moving forward, listen up, because this is for you. My 14-day relief in your grief experience brings you powerful, impactful, bite-sized daily content alongside the perfect meditation. One of the biggest struggles I hear from my members and clients is that they sometimes just need some relief from the stress, sadness, and pain that grief and loss can cause. And this can pop up at any time, right? But here's the thing. So many people are kind of lost and unsure about where to start doing this. And this can feel like a huge thing to tackle when we're overwhelmed. So we are doing it together, and we're starting with just 14 days. Give me 2 weeks and I will help you begin to take that anxiety, heartache, and anguish and turn it into peace, clarity, and hope as you move forward. You have nothing to lose by joining, and it's all less than $40. I have no doubt these 14 days will be an inspiring, uplifting, and perspective-changing experience for you. Learn more and join through the link in the show description. Also, some grounding techniques. So when anxiety creeps in, it's really great to try and ground yourself in the present moment. So a couple techniques, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method can help. So naming 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And this is great because you can redirect your focus from these anxious thoughts to your more immediate surroundings. And that helps you stay really centered and just very present when our mind might be going kind of to the past or to the future, and it's kind of all over the place, right? And also box breath. So this can kind of be however many counts you really want it to be, but I like to encourage, 4 deep breaths in, like holding it for 4 and then out for 4. And it's amazing. I mean, even just, I barely half did it just then, and I could already feel the benefits of taking that deep breath. So doing that multiple times, as many times as you feel you need to do it, amazing, amazing practice. I also want to encourage you to take breaks from social media. I've talked a little bit about social media on this podcast already. I'm definitely going to do more episodes on it to come, but social media can really amplify those feelings of loneliness or even inadequacy, especially when it seems like, everyone else is celebrating very happily and doing far better than we feel that we're doing on any given holiday season, on any holiday, any day of the week, really, at any point throughout the year. So consider taking breaks, or maybe muting your accounts, or having your phone on airplane mode past a certain time of day, or make sure you're only scrolling for maybe like a couple minutes at a time, and be really cognizant of what accounts you're following, and ask yourself, does this content make you feel uplifted and inspired and comforted and supported, or does it make you long for something you maybe don't have or no longer have, or whatever sort of negative emotions it might bring up for you, just being cognizant of that. And then another thing here is to sort of create a holiday survival plan of sorts. And in doing this, I want you to try and have some fun with this activity and really use this as an opportunity to get in touch with what really helps you. So writing down activities that help soothe you. And what's great about this is you can just kind of have this list to turn to when your anxiety spikes a little bit, and this can just be a great lifeline. So, making sure that you have a way to sort of let things out of your mind, journaling, talking it out in a voice note to yourself, having someone to talk it out with, whatever form this comes in, that's what I encourage. It's all about what works for you, So in terms of coping with these triggers and the anxiety on the actual day, like let's say the actual holiday arrives, whatever this holiday is for you, clearly there can be a mix of emotions here. So just a few things to, keep in mind here and try and practice. Giving yourself permission to grieve. Remembering that it's okay to have those moments of sadness, even in the middle of a celebration. In fact, sometimes that's when they can hit us, and it can be really jarring and kind of unsettling because we're maybe in the middle of a party, or we're maybe even around people we don't know very well, or whatever the environment is. Sometimes it's like a really uncomfortable time to have these feelings come up. But I want to encourage you, if you need to let it out, have a moment to cry, let yourself cry. If you need to excuse yourself, whatever you need to do to work through that moment. Again, I bring up breath work again. That's a really powerful tool when we sort of can't lose it. We don't have that luxury in that particular moment. But giving yourself permission to do that and not feeling like you have to tamp it down for yourself or certainly anybody around you. And one thing I really like to encourage too is taking time in the morning especially, but also in the evening as well, to, as I say, witness your grief and make time for it and mentally prepare for the day ahead. That I think is really critical. So let's say you have a gathering coming up that afternoon, or you have to do something at work, or whatever is ahead of you. Walking through it that day, maybe doing a visualization exercise and sort of getting yourself mentally ready for, okay, this is how this might go. If I do feel something coming up for me, if I do feel a difficult moment coming, here's how I feel like I can handle that, and just be like, okay, I mean, listen, and be honest with yourself and give yourself all the love in the world and be like, you know what, I will do the best I can. I am doing the best I can. No promises here, but I'm going to try. and I'm going to do my best and know that that is okay and be comfortable with that, because during the holidays, especially, we can feel like we're hanging by a thread. So, again, if you need those moments of solitude, or you need sort of a moment to sort of hype yourself up a little bit, do that. And, depending what kind of music you like, maybe you can kind of like work through some of that through music, or kind of get yourself in a better mood through music. That really helps me. I love music you can kind of dance to and things like that. So there's, just certain genres, or maybe even a podcast that can kind of just distract you and sort of get your head in a better space. And this kind of goes hand in hand with this, but just practicing self-compassion. It's so easy to get caught up in what we should be feeling or should be doing during the holidays, but come on, you guys, there is no right or wrong way to navigate this or grieve it. Like I said, you're doing the best you can, especially if this is your first one, especially if this is your first holiday season without your loved one, or maybe after your divorce, or, after you've ended a friendship with someone that you typically spend the holidays with. I mean, this can come in any shape or form. So that self-compassion, that's a big one. Also, of course, having a support system to lean on. So whether that is family or friends, or a grief support group, or a grief coach like myself. And I also offer a grief support group through everything I do here. So don't be afraid to reach out. Get some people in your corner who get you, who aren't going to try and like silver lining you, if that makes sense. They're not going to just throw platitudes at you and try and just make you feel better. Sometimes, let's be real, we don't want to be made to feel better. Sometimes we just need to like really sit with our grief. Just having someone that you can, maybe a sort of a support buddy of sorts, that you can just kind of keep in touch with, whether that's in person or virtually, and just have someone that is not going to try and like fix things and feel that they need to make it better for you, but who rather can just sit there with you and be like, you know what, let's just acknowledge that this sucks. This is not what we had hoped for or expected this holiday season. And this is really crappy. And I just need to vent. I just need to sit there for a moment. I don't want to live in that dark place, but I need to just feel angry for a moment. I just need to admit that this feels unfair and this doesn't feel good. And sometimes we just need to talk that out. Sometimes we just need to vent, right? So like I said, if you don't have those people in your life who kind of get it or can understand you in a really meaningful way, please consider joining an online grief support community, either through me or whatever resonates for you. It can be really, really impactful, especially around a time that is very heightened with emotions. And last but not least, and I'm going to just touch on this, I'm going to have an episode here in this little series that focuses sort of on gratitude and what gratitude even means and looks like and stuff, and how to be realistic about that. I'm going to say, I want for you to just try and also focus on moments of joy. I don't say that as a substitute for feeling sadness and feeling your grief. Grieving doesn't mean you have to reject any form of happiness. It is okay to let those moments of joy find you, even if they're fleeting, right? So maybe it's watching a funny holiday movie. Maybe it is doing an activity with family or friends, like a puzzle or something, charades, I don't know. Maybe it's enjoying a cup of tea or a cup of eggnog. I'm a big eggnog girl. Me and my dad, big eggnog people. And just kind of relishing in that moment a little bit. And that being said, when it comes to like food or drink, I know certain dishes or certain drinks or whatever can kind of be a bit triggering and make us miss our loved ones even more. But let's say you are just faced with it. Let's say it's stuffing, right? That was a big one for me and my parents, and me and my dad especially. You can't, for Thanksgiving especially, it's hard for us to kind of get around stuffing. It's a big part of a lot of our holiday. So let's say that's on your plate. Maybe consider slowing down and really enjoying that food. And think about, if nothing else, how delicious it is. And that you are alive. and that you are here and you have the privilege to enjoy this food. And even think about people around the world that are maybe not as fortunate as you and maybe don't have the resources and this beautiful dinner in front of them. Those types of thoughts and perspectives can be very humbling. But again, this is not to make up for any grief that you're feeling. And it's not that you can't wish your loved ones weren't here still. We do. That's not going to just miraculously go away. But just allowing these little pleasures into your life without guilt, I think is just so important. And it can really just kind of change the way that we experience the holiday season. So just something to keep in mind. Just keep it in your back pocket. All right. For now, let the joy come if it does. But listen, no pressure. If you're listening to this podcast and you are approaching a very difficult holiday season ahead, I feel you. My heart goes out to you. I know joy and merriment and laughter can feel very far away right now. So just some final thoughts. If there's one thing I want you to take away from today's episode specifically, there's a few things. It's, for sure, grief does not take a break around the holidays. In fact, it can be, like I said, amplified. But there are ways to cope. And I really hope kind of just a few of the things that we've covered today has been helpful for you, whether you put these things into practice or not. Even sometimes just hearing them can be helpful. You don't have to push your feelings aside or pretend that everything is fine. You simply don't. Unfortunately, sometimes we have to put on a brave face and we have to be merry for other people. Parents especially, I'm looking at you, like wanting to make it a really special time for children or your child if you have one. I only have a 10-month-old, so I'm not quite in the thick of it yet, but I can empathize with that feeling. And I just want to give you a big hug because I know the pressure that there can be trying to be a parent amongst all of this grief. And again, just give yourself the space to feel whatever comes up and know that it's okay to pivot and change how you approach the holidays to protect your heart. So thank you so much for joining me today. Again, if you are struggling, please remember you are not alone. This community is here to help support you. There are resources available if you need them. But I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear this too, who is navigating this season of grief. And until tomorrow, take care of yourself. Remember, your grief might change. It will change. It's going to evolve over time, but it does not have to define you and it does not have to define your holiday season. And yes, our holiday season is going to look and feel different, but there can be beautiful and very fulfilling ways that we can build on that, if not this season, with some time. And it's all about trying to figure out what that looks like for you now. But it is possible, I promise. All right. Thank you so much for dropping into day 3. Day 4 is coming tomorrow, so stay tuned. And in the meantime, I am sending you lots of light and love, and I will see you guys tomorrow. I am sending you a huge thank you for tuning into today's episode, my friend. I'm so grateful you're here and for the steps you are taking to heal your heart, open your mind, fulfill your soul, learn, grow, and evolve, and move through this crazy thing called life in big, beautiful, impactful ways. Visit lossesbecomegains.com for my blog, membership, more coping tools, ways to work with me, and so much more. And be sure you're following along on Instagram and Facebook at Losses Become Gains, and on Instagram and TikTok at Life with Grief Podcast. I love seeing new faces, meeting new people, hearing your stories, and supporting you however I can. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and share this episode or this podcast with someone who could use it too. And remember to always keep asking yourself, how will I turn my losses into gains today? I'll catch you in the next episode.